Welcome to episode 3 of the Credit Card BS podcast. My name is Sean. I'm the UC Berkeley graduate that created and taught the university-sponsored course on credit card rewards. I'm here today with my co-host, Sherwin.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sherwin. I'm a student at Stanford University. I got into this credit card points and travel hobby about more than a year ago, and since then, I've planned my entire credit card strategy for my family. We've amassed millions of points and opened more than a dozen cards. And today, we have a very exciting topic, free business and first-class flights to Japan and Taiwan.
Yes. So this is a very interesting topic because there are some amazing sweet spot awards to each of these destinations, and there are some pretty great products being flown. So, these aren't some like run-of-the-mill loser business classes. These are some pretty amazing first and business classes. So with that, let's start with talking about the most famous one, arguably, is flying ANA to Japan. So there's a variety of ways to redeem on ANA. They have some amazing products. So the most basic way would probably be using ANA's own miles. Now, normally, for most flight programs, using the miles of that program to fly that product is a bad idea. For whatever reason, that's the world we live in. If you want to fly on a high-tier product, you probably have to use partner miles, but not necessarily in this case. So for ANA, there's a couple quirks to the program. One is, if you're redeeming ANA miles, you can only redeem for round-trip awards. So I cannot redeem, let's say, from LA to Tokyo, and that's it. Basically, every other program lets you do that. I can't do that. I would have to redeem for LAX to Tokyo, and then Tokyo to LAX. There's a little bit of wiggle room there of like how you structure the round trip. Like it doesn't actually have to be the same departure and return airport exactly, but generally speaking, you'll have to do some type of a return to somewhere around your origin. So that's the major drawback there. But ANA does charge very reasonable rates for flying ANA business class to Japan. So between 75,000 and 90,000 miles, I believe it is. And this is a very, very reasonable rate because it means you're paying less than 50,000 points each way, which is extremely competitive. For, international long-haul business class or first class, that's amazing. Most programs, would charge double that. Now, with this, one thing you should note is that the taxes and fees are going to be rather high for most of the ways that you'd redeem via ANA. So it depends, of course, on the current market at the time. But I believe like right now it's about, what would you say, Sherwin? Like $600, $800 round trip?
600 to 800 is possible. Yeah, it really depends on the particular route. Yeah. So something to keep in mind. But I will say the mileage redemption chart itself is very cheap compared to other programs. Like where else are you going to get like a round trip business class flight for like 80 to 90,000 miles? It's almost unheard of, right?
Exactly. It is such a rare thing to find these days, and which is why ANA miles are just so powerful. Now,
So Sean, how can you earn ANA miles?
great question. So the main way to earn ANA miles, or pretty much the only way in the United States, is via American Express. So American Express, if I'm correct, is the only major bank which has a transfer partner of ANA. And so it doesn't matter if you have Chase points, Citi points, Capital One points, you can't earn ANA. This is why American Express points can be so valuable, because they're the only ones that transfer to ANA. We know some people that just speculatively transfer all their points to ANA because that's how much they love it. Now, one caveat with ANA miles you have to be aware of is that, and these are like the two kind of big things. One is they expire after 3 years. So once you transfer those miles into your account, the clock is ticking. You better have a redemption in mind, or you better be pretty highly skilled. Number two is that normally how we, work in award seats is that, an award seat pops up. Let me transfer my miles over. Once I already know it's there, let me book the said seat. The problem with that in this case is ANA miles almost always take 48 hours to transfer. So with a lot of these big seat dumps, they'll be gone by then, right? If you see an award seat pop up, whether it's close in or whether there's some big dump of all these seats, it's going to be gone within 48 hours, very, very likely. So those are the two things you have to be aware on these miles. So that's why some people do speculatively transfer into this program just to have them there. So when a good redemption pops up, they can redeem, because it is just so cheap. Now, unfortunately though, for, ANA miles metal, you can't get amazing first class rates. I don't know the exact award pricing for the first class seat on ANA, but I know it's not nearly as competitive as their business class pricing. And so, yeah, it's one thing you have to be aware of. And just one other side note before we talk on the other ways to redeem ANA miles to redeem 4 ANA flights is that you should note ANA operates 2 majorly different products out of the United States. So there's their standard business class, notably seen on the 787. So that will be in a 1-2-1 configuration. It's still a great business class product. You have great food. I've flown it. It's pretty comfortable seats, to be honest. I would be fine flying that for long haul. But then they have their flagship top tier product, which I've also flown, called the Room. And the Room is amazing because you have a full shutting door, the thickest, widest seat I've ever seen. It's so absurd how big that seat is. And it's a brand new product, big screens, and yeah, it's one of the best business class seats in the world. And so right now, I believe they're flying it out of SFO. I think they may have canceled it out of LAX. They're not flying it out of Seattle. They may be flying it out of like Chicago and JFK. I'm not aware on it because it changes a lot, actually. Sherwin, do you remember by any chance which routes they fly?
I don't remember which flights or which routes there, but definitely if you want to redeem for this, I would recommend checking and verifying like what product is flown from the route you want to take, because I think it's pretty much the same number of miles regardless of whether you get like the new product or the old product. So if possible, I would recommend going for the newer, the Room or the Suite products.
Yeah, you're correct. The amount of miles required is independent of the product. So ideally, you would want to be flying, the Room if you're going to be doing it, if you're going to be flying business class, because that's just an objectively better product.
Sean, have you flown any ANA products yourself?
Yes, so I've flown both actually their products. So I've flown the Room long haul. So I flew ANA the Room from LAX to Tokyo, and then from Tokyo to Hong Kong, I flew their 787 business class. And both are great, and of course the Room is better. There's no way you could argue that. But I will say I enjoyed their 787 business class. I think it was, not necessarily the most private thing, but it was just, I don't know, it was kind of like relaxing in a weird way. Like maybe I was just really tired. It could have been that because I was like really, really tired. But
okay,
it was I enjoyed it. It was a simple business class. It was comfortable. Even lie flat, like it didn't feel lumpy, which I can't say about all lie flat business class seats.
And what do you feel about the soft product, like the service, the food, those aspects of the flight?
Very, very good question. So I think they were good. I think it was, so for my Room flight, this is what I should note. I had a late night departure. And so ANA is notorious for heavily limiting service on their late night departures. So I didn't get the full service experience necessarily on the Room. I thought the food was good. I wasn't mind blown, if that makes sense. Like I think
you're a vegetarian though, so I would take your opinion with a grain of salt.
That's fair. I am vegetarian and I don't drink alcohol, so I should lose a lot of the cool benefits of these products. But like one example is like, I made, mentioned this in the video. The dessert they give you is this Haagen-Dazs ice cream. The thing, they might as well have handed me a brick because the thing wasn't edible. Like I had to wait like 20 minutes to where I could even get like the tiniest bite out of that thing. They must have frozen it with liquid nitrogen ice.
That's so funny.
So it was a good product. They were good products. Don't get me wrong. But like after flying like Q suites and stuff, I'm like, oh, okay.
So Sean, what if I don't have American Express points, but I still want to fly ANA? Are there other ways to book it?
Very good question. So if you don't have American Express points and you want to book ANA, there's still a few options. So most famously is probably Virgin Atlantic. So Virgin Atlantic has a very competitive award chart still for ANA business class. They used to have a phenomenal award chart for ANA first class, the best redemption you could get in the world for ANA first class. They, without notice, completely devalued it, and now it's not that good anymore. It's half decent.
I'd say that the devaluation is unfortunate, but like it's still a good rate considering the cash price of the first class product, which can be like, I don't know, 15,000 round trip or something crazy. So I still think it's worth it if you want to try that product.
That's true. The rate is still pretty competitive. So it's 125,000 round trip from the West Coast, and then 70,000 round trip from the East Coast. So that is still
170,000.
Sorry, did I say 70? Sorry, well, 100. If it was 70,000, I'd be flying it every day.
And this is round trip.
Round trip, yes.
Yeah. And then with Virgin Atlantic, you can book one-way awards, and it would just be half that cost.
Yes, that's what makes it so good, because they used to not have that for Virgin Atlantic. It used to had to be round trip. Now they've opened it, or a couple years ago, or a year and a half ago, something like that. They opened it to one-way awards. So 120, you're paying like just over 60,000 miles one way to fly in international first class on one of the best products in the world. That's an insane redemption,
Yeah.
nonetheless. It's not as good as before, but still very, very good. Now, for the business class pricing, right, it's still very competitive compared to ANA. So if you're flying from the West Coast to Japan, it's 90,000 round trip. So 45,000 each way. And then from the East Coast, it's 95,000 round trip. And so these are very competitive prices. You're still paying high taxes and fees for sure. Like you're going to be, when
Yeah.
I booked it via Virgin Atlantic, going to Tokyo, it was like 350 one way in taxes. And then for my first class flight coming back from Tokyo to SFO, that is $450 in taxes one way. So not a cheap,
Okay.
pretty expensive YQ there, but still for the product I'm flying and for the redemption rates I'm getting, it's pretty insane,
That's phenomenal. Yeah.
especially considering that you have frequent transfer bonuses to Virgin Atlantic. So ANA, there's no transfer bonuses, like ever. I don't think there's ever been one. Or if there has, it's been so long ago, not even on my radar. But Virgin Atlantic, they have frequent 30% bonuses from basically all the major currencies. So, you take these redemption rates and when you're getting a 30% bonus on your points, you're paying much, very, very reasonable cost.
Yeah. Yeah. So a couple things to know with this redemption is that Virgin points are much easier to earn because they are transfer partner from Citi, Chase, Capital One, and American Express. Another advantage is that they transfer instantly. So that problem Sean described earlier about ANA miles taking 2 to 3 days to transfer is not present here. You can transfer them instantly. So it's little less of a risk with award availability disappearing by the time your points transfer over. And another important thing to know is that you can't book these on the Virgin Atlantic website, and rather you would have to call in to talk to a Virgin Atlantic agent. But from what I've heard, these agents are pretty competent and are able to ticket it without too much issue.
I agree with that. Yeah. In my experience talking with them, they've been very, very competent, very quick. The only time I've ever really had trouble reaching them was when there have been award dumps, like when ANA First Class had that huge dump last year. And it was like an hour to get on the phone. And I heard stories of people like calling the reps. And once they told them the flight number, the rep hung up on them because they were so sick of booking that flight.
Oh, no.
And for someone, it happened twice too, I heard.
Oh, no.
But they were eventually able to get the seat. But overall, very competent reps, no issues there. And so one other way to book this seat, if you don't want to use Virgin Atlantic, and this is potentially the best way to book it if you're looking for lower taxes and fees, and this would be via Aeroplan. So Aeroplan charges 75,000 points one way from the West Coast of the United States, and that's fairly reasonable pricing, I would say. I mean, it's not cheap. It's not cheap, but it's fair. There is a sweet spot, however, if you fly out of Seattle Airport, it's just under 5,000 miles, and so on their award chart, it's only 55,000 points one way, which is a much more competitive redemption, especially considering, I don't know the exact difference in taxes and fees, but I believe Aeroplan has significantly lower YQ on their flights for ANA than Virgin Atlantic or ANA miles do. So if you're flying out of Seattle, it probably makes the most sense actually to redeem via Aeroplan compared with ANA or Virgin Atlantic because you're paying that very, very reasonable mileage rate and getting significantly lower taxes and fees. If you're redeeming from other parts of the West Coast, like LA, San Francisco, it could still be good, but it's not as good, as if you were flying out of Seattle because you're just getting such a good deal, flying from Seattle there with the 55K.
Yeah, I think that's a really good tip. Like, make sure you study the Aeroplan award chart because they do it based off of the number of miles, like in distance in the flight, and they price it that way rather than just doing like general regions of like US, Japan, or whatnot. So, if you can find those sweet spots like from the Seattle airport, it's a very smart way to do it.
For sure.
Okay,
Oh, yes.
Go ahead.
Oh, so you go.
Should we talk about the next way to fly to Japan?
Yes. So the other way to fly into Japan, if you're trying to do it in luxury, would be via Japan Airlines. So for this one, unfortunately, there's less of a viable way to redeem via transferable points. So there's really only two ways to redeem Japan Airlines at a competitive rate, at least what I'm aware of right now. So one would be via American Airlines miles. This may be the actual best way to redeem. And the other way would be via Alaska miles. So for American Airlines, okay, and so actually let me just first talk about JAL's products real quick. So for JAL, they have a a big number of business class products actually. Like it's kind of confusing to navigate. Like they have their Sky Suites, their Sky Suites 2, their Sky Suites 3, the reverse herringbone seats. Like they have a huge variety of business class products. So you'll want to make sure, what product is being flown on which route before you're redeeming. I think if I'm correct, one of their routes flies like a 222 business class. Like what is this, 2004? So
Yeah, you
so
always check what the product is that you're flying. Don't assume that just because an airline has business class, it's going to be the same on every route.
definitely, yeah. I'd be pretty pissed off if I was flying that 222 and paid my hard-earned miles for that. So, I make sure you're checking that because there's a lot greater of a variety of products. For their first class product, it is all the same. It's from what, it seems to be all the same. And so they don't operate it on a lot of routes, but the routes they do operate it on, it's a 1-2-1 configuration. The hard product is definitely on the old side. So I haven't flown it personally, but from what I've heard, it's on, the hard product's on a very old side, but the soft product is supposed to be top tier. So, like, one notable thing is if you're flying out of Tokyo to the United States, they serve $1,000 bottles of Ceylon champagne. And so that's a thing that, like, a lot of people try to, drink a couple glasses of when they're on that flight. We know someone in the community group that we run, by the way, link down below, sign up, Discord group down below. But we know someone who flew that product and he was just, he doesn't drink much, but he was just loading up on those $1,000, bottle glasses of champagne because it's his fun
Got to
chance to have
maximize
it.
the value.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's a great product. It's on the older side, but soft products top tier, great food. And so that's the thing to note there. Now, the arguably best way to redeem would be via American Airlines miles. So American charges 60,000 points one way in business anywhere in the United States to Japan, and only 80,000 in first from anywhere in the United States to Japan. That is awesome. That is an amazing redemption. So if you're doing this, go for first. Like
Also, another thing I like about American is that the taxes and fees are super low because they don't pass on the fuel surcharges, as well as American has a very flexible cancellation policy. You have like absolutely no penalty if you cancel an award and you just get your miles back.
That's very true. Yeah, they have such a good cancellation policy. It's very easy to search on their website. You can book the awards online for the most part. I mean, for Japan Airlines, you definitely can. And it's a very, very easy to use currency. Now, would you agree with me that someone redeeming this, for this, if there's both a business class and a first class seat open, that it would be a no-brainer to pay the extra 20,000 miles to fly first class?
I think in terms of the difference in value you're getting, yes, I would agree. But I could also see circumstances when since American miles are so hard to earn that what might want to save up so they can do a round trip or another flight. So it just depends on person to person. But for sure, if you have the miles and you want to maximize the value, go for the first class.
Yeah, because the first, it seems really good from what I've
Yeah.
been able to understand.
It's
And
only a small difference in miles. It's crazy.
it's a very small difference, especially considering what some of these programs are charging. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
this is the main way I would redeem for Japan Airlines first class. If you're redeeming for Japan Airlines first class, very likely that you should be using American Airlines miles. Unfortunately, it's very difficult to earn American Airlines miles. The only transferable currency that transfers to them is built points, which are, pretty difficult to rack up a heavy amount of. Like, yes, you can earn Built's the program that lets you earn points on rent, and, that's great and all, but unless, there's a cap on how much you can earn, and you can't earn that fast, so it's tough to earn American Airlines miles. The other way to redeem on Japan Airlines, though, would be via Alaska. So Alaskan miles, it's 60,000 points in business class to or from the West Coast, 80,000 from the East Coast in business. So see, we've already matched the first class
These are
pricing.
one way. Yeah.
These are one way.
Yes.
Yes. So we've already matched the pricing of AA if you're flying business from the East Coast. And if you're flying first from the West Coast, it's 85,000 one way and 100,000 from the East Coast one way. Now, the one pro of Alaskan miles are that they do allow complimentary stopovers on their awards. So you could, let's say you're flying business class to Japan, you could add a stopover in Japan and then continue on somewhere else on your itinerary. But keep in mind that could be if you're continuing on to a different segment of the award chart. So let's say I was going to a different part in Asia, then I am going to be paying a higher, pricing potentially. And because Alaska just devalued their award chart or I guess they don't technically have an award chart, but they devalued their awards for Japan Airlines, you may not be paying a very good rate. But if you're flying business class from the West Coast, that would probably be the sweet spot, I would say, with Alaskan miles. For anything else, American would probably be the way to go. Would you agree with that? Or, I mean, as a general kind of rule of thumb?
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I would want to add that the disadvantage with American Alaska miles is that, as Sean said, they're not really a major. They're not a transfer partner of any major, bank. So really, the best way to earn them is from the sign up bonuses from the American and Alaska co-branded cards. So American has co-branded cards with Barclays as well as Citi, and then for Alaska, they have co-branded cards with Bank of America. The other thing I wanted to add is it is possible to book these awards with other Oneworld partners. So like with British Airways Avios and Cathay Pacific Asia Miles. Uh, and for those, there's more transfer partners. Like you can transfer Amex points to Asia Miles, for example, or Avios. But those usually require a little more miles and more taxes and fees. Like both British Airways and Asia Miles, if I recall correctly, charge pretty high taxes and fees. And I think Cathay is also like 75,000 miles one way business class from the West Coast to Japan, but more taxes and fees. So if you don't have American Alaska miles and you really want to fly Japan Airlines, you can look into the British Airways Avios and Cathay Pacific Asia Miles.
That's a very good point. And yeah, so if you are doing that, if you're paying that rate, if an ANA seat is open up, I'd recommend probably taking the ANA seat, unless for some reason you really specifically want to fly Japan Airlines. Now, for the last note here, let's just talk about the availability before we move on to redeeming flights to Taiwan. So for a lot of award seats and a lot of programs, but particularly for Japan Airlines and ANA, you're going to really see availability at schedule open. So like, basically 365 days out, or, maybe 366, whatever their schedule open day is. And so you can grab seats then. You can maybe grab, a couple seats then. And that's one option. But if you don't get that, if you're not booking literally at schedule open, then one other side note, if you're trying to book at schedule open, it may not even work still because, for example, let's say you're trying to redeem ANA business class. Virgin Atlantic only has access to those awards 330 days out. But ANA metal miles have access to those like 360 days out. So a lot of times, if you want those seats, they're already going to be taken by the ANA, member accounts. But the other way to book these seats, the easier way, is close in. So if you're looking like, 2 weeks to a month out or even closer sometimes, that's when you'll have a much, much easier time securing these seats. Japan Airlines specifically, pretty consistently releases their first class availability at 14 days. If you're flexible, like if you're just wanting to go somewhere, you want to fly first class, it's almost like difficult to not find a Japan Airlines first class seat close in if you're willing to reposition to various airports. So look close in. That's my advice for these awards. If you need to have a trip set in stone, book a refundable economy ticket, and then once your award seat opens up, grab it. If the award seat doesn't open up, then you have that backup in economy.
Yeah, I would say in general, the trend from my personal observations is that Japan Airlines does a much better job releasing award availability to partners than does ANA, which can be like quite difficult to find. But ANA's like in terms of number of miles charged is like such a better deal. So those are kind of like some trade-offs you could think about. And also, if you join our Discord, there have been a number of times when some of our experts have found big dumps of availability and shared it with our community before everyone else. And some people are able to take advantage. And it's free, so you should do it.
That's true. Yeah, we knew like 12 hours before any of the blogs knew. And so that gave our members a full chance to book it. I booked it. I booked 2 seats on it with the knowledge from the community. So yeah, check out the link in the description.
That's amazing. Yeah. Okay, should we go on to Taiwan now?
Yes, I want to hear all you know about the awards to Taiwan.
Yeah, so I know a little more about this because my family is from Taiwan, so I've done a little research and looked at it. So there are kind of a couple ways to fly to Taiwan. So the first one is EVA Air. They offer a very solid business class product, and I think their strength is really like the soft product. The service, the food, it's really good. It's a lie flat seat. It's usually a 1-to-1 configuration, so you don't have to like share the space with someone else. The best way to book this in terms of the miles required is with ANA miles, as we talked about. It is 95,000 miles round trip. Very amazing value considering these flights can be upwards of $6,000 round trip from the US to Taiwan. These are generally direct flights. Some other ways you can book include Aeroplan. So Air Canada Aeroplan costs 75,000 miles one way or 150,000 miles round trip from the West Coast. And if you're on the East Coast, it'll be 87.5K miles one way. Now, do note that Aeroplan is pretty stingy, I want to say, with their like cancellation or change policies. You might be paying like 150 Canadian dollars to cancel your flight or something. So I would say be a little more careful with them and only book it if you're like pretty sure you're going to go. Now, the other way to fly to Taiwan on EVA business class using miles is using EVA Air's own mileage program. It costs 75,000 points one way or 150,000 round trip. But it will be 80,000 if you're flying from Chicago, New York, Houston, and Toronto. And you might ask, oh, why would I ever want to fly with EVA miles if ANA is so much cheaper, right? It's 95,000 round trip rather than the 150,000 round trip. And the answer is EVA gives better award availability to people who redeem using their miles than partners. There might be flights with 3 or 4 available business class seats using EVA miles, but only 0 or 1 through ANA or Aeroplan. And the only really good way to rack up EVA miles is with Citi thank you points because they transfer 1-to-1 to EVA Air, which is why I think Citi points are quite valuable if they're used correctly, and a little underrated, as I talked about in the last episode. You should go check that out. Okay, so there is also United, which you can book.
Well, let me just ask you actually real quick. How are the taxes and fees? I forget if you mentioned, how are the taxes and fees on EVA miles?
Ooh, I don't quite remember. I think there's something that's decently reasonable. It's not like crazy like British or I'll probably have to get back to you on that one, but that's a good question. Definitely a factor in the taxes and fees. So yeah, I think EVA miles is the way to go for the availability. ANA is the way to go for like the fewest number of miles required. But again, ANA, you have to book a round trip, whereas in Aeroplan EVA miles, you can book one-way awards. Now, there are a couple of nuances you might want to consider. So stopover rules. So ANA allows 1 stopover. Aeroplan allows you to add stopovers 5,000 points each, which is still a steal. But arguably, EVA's own miles has the best stopover policy. You're allowed 1 stopover each way. So you could have potentially several destinations on one itinerary for 150,000 miles round trip, which is great. But if you want to book those, you probably have to call in to EVA instead of using their website. The one other thing I would add is EVA Air's website is so bad and so horrendous, and it's usable, but there is a steep learning curve. So it might take a while, and it's like really slow. It's ancient. It's garbage. But you are able to use it if you put in the time and effort to do it.
For users that haven't used the website, could you compare it, like how difficult it is to, let's say, compare to Turkish and Avianca Life miles?
Yeah, I think Turkish is more buggy, so EVA's not as buggy. But the problem with EVA is just like it's slow and the way it's designed is non-intuitive. And also like some of the English translations of things are not very good. So it might take a little while to understand like what is going on. Also, they have a really stupid mileage expiration policy where it's not based on activity, but based on when a particular mile is earned, and they track that very closely. So something to keep in mind. I wouldn't recommend transferring speculatively unless you have something in mind. One other thing is you're able to do upgrade awards on EVA. So for a fewer number of miles, if you book like an economy or premium economy class ticket on the standard or up levels, you can upgrade that to business class using EVA miles. And I did the cents per point calculation here, and it's still pretty competitive, though I still think ANA is the way to go.
So one thing I want to ask you then, so with these upgrade awards, are you paying an increased amount of taxes and fees? Like, let's say I was able to get a really like rock bottom cheap cash economy ticket. Would it ever make sense to do that over booking the award directly? Let's assume ANA wasn't an option. Let's say I'm doing one of the more expensive programs like EVA or Aeroplan. Would it ever make
Yeah,
sense to do the upgrade award just because I had such a cheap cash
right.
economy ticket?
So you can't do the upgrade award on Aeroplan, but you can do it on EVA. I will say, um, if I recall correctly, when you do the upgrade award, they don't charge you additional taxes and fees because you already paid that as part of the economy ticket. But I may be wrong, so I have to double check on that. But one thing to note is usually the very cheapest economy ticket, like economy basic, one of the most restrictions, cancellations, whatever, that's not eligible for upgrades. You'd have to book the economy standard or economy up tickets, which can be quite more expensive. So that's also something to keep in mind. So, when you say you book the rock cheap economy ticket, that's not going to happen, unfortunately, for this.
Okay, so you would need some kind of like maybe an airfare or something on the economy standard to even have a chance at something like that kind of being
Yeah,
viable
EVA has
compared to
weird
just going basic.
pricing where for each class, so they have economy, premium economy, and business. For each class, there's like three levels: basic, standard, and up. And you need to book either the standard or up ones in order to upgrade with miles. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other product you can fly direct from the US to Taiwan that people like is United Polaris. I've only flown on EVA business myself, but not on United. But from what I've heard, EVA has better service and soft product and food, but United's seat is slightly better. Though from my personal experience, the EVA seat was great too. It was like completely flat, very comfortable. So I don't think you can go wrong there. Um, Sean, did you have any other things or
No, I
questions
think
to add
that I
about
think
EVA?
that yeah, that all sounds good to me. I do hope to fly that product one day. They can't be stingy with
Yeah,
award availability is the only other thing. Like they're
that is true.
notoriously stingy.
Yeah. So, I mean, Aeroplan is the one transfer partner where you can transfer immediately from, Capital One, Amex, Chase. So, like, if you see something, that might be the way to grab it. ANA and EVA miles both, unfortunately, require 2 to 3 days to transfer. And the EVA only transfers from Citi, ANA only transfers from Amex. Aeroplan is like the most promiscuous transfer partner, if you know what I mean. Um, okay, some other ways to fly to Taiwan other than EVA and United via Starlines. So China Airlines, not to be confused with Air China. So Air China is airline from mainland China. China Airlines is Taiwanese airline. I think they also have a really solid product, but it's going to be more expensive to fly them using miles. Your really only good options are through Skyteam like Delta, Virgin Atlantic, Air France, and they can be pretty expensive, maybe 80 to 90,000 miles one way in business class. So I haven't really looked at that too much, but that is an option if you need the availability or you want to try that product. And then there's this new exciting proposition where there's this new airline that just launched this year, last year, called Starlux Airlines, also a Taiwanese airline. Right now, they only have LAX to Taipei, but I think they're going to expand to San Francisco to Taipei pretty soon. From what I've read online, because I haven't gone on it myself, they also have a top tier, top-notch business class product that is really solid. And what's even more exciting is that Alaska Airlines has partnered with them. So this isn't available yet, but it's coming soon. You can fly business class for 60,000 Alaska Air miles one way on Starlux Airlines.
That is amazing because especially considering how good that product looks. Like I've seen some images of it and it looks really nice. Because like
Yeah.
that's an amazing redemption rate. And then I'm assuming here we can also combine that with the stopover awards too. So I don't know
Uh,
exactly what the pricing on that might be, but depending on how they price it out in the region in Asia and stuff, you could fly to Taipei and then you could do a stopover and then I don't know you could fly to Hong Kong, you could fly to Japan. I'm not sure on the route network, but you could
yeah.
potentially do something like that for an amazing deal with Alaska miles.
Yeah. And one thing that remains to be seen, though, is what the award availability will look like. With Starlux Airlines, we don't really know how generous they're going to be. So that's something you should stay tuned for. And just one last thing on add. Another way to get to Taiwan is to go through Japan first. So anything Sean talked to you about earlier, you could fly ANA stopover or either stopover or do a layover in, Tokyo and then head to Taipei. I know there's a way you could do that with American Miles on Japan Airlines, and you would be flying to Songshan Airport. So it's a smaller airport in Taipei, TSA, when you have a stopover in Haneda or what's the other Japan airport?
Narita.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, that's all the ways you can fly to Taiwan using miles.
Awesome. Just a note on that Starlux one. My suspicion is that once the partnership does go live, that's the time to book. That will probably have it's either going to be completely bone dry, or when that partnership first launches, once you're able to book those award seats with Alaska Miles, there may be wide open availability for like a few hours, because that's when everyone's going to scoop them up. So make sure to stay connected on that, because once that opens up, you might have a good chance to grab them.
Yeah, and keep in mind, Alaska miles are hard to earn, right? So you might want to plan ahead and open one of those Alaska co-branded cards to get sign-up bonus. Usually, I would recommend waiting until these American and Alaska cards have elevated sign-up bonuses. I think the highest recently was like 70K on the personal one, on the business, or something like that.
It was 70K, yeah. And
Yeah.
my player two got both of them, so that's
Oh,
nice.
awesome. Yeah, Bank of
Definitely
America
consider
can be
signing this up.
finicky with approval, so
Yes, yeah, that's putting it lightly.
yeah. Okay, is that all for today, Sean?
I think that's all for today. So if you've enjoyed this video and you want to help support the channel, please take a look at the links in the description. If you want to sign up for any credit cards and use our affiliate links, it helps us out so much. So please consider doing that. Join the free award travel Discord at the link in the description, completely for free. You'll meet some really smart people in there. We're dropping deal alerts all the time. Yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and we will see you in the next one.
Thank you. Bye.